The Nobel Prize in Economics was an afterthought. The first Nobel Prizes were established in 1895. 74 years later, a Nobel Prize in Economics was added to the mix in 1969. And in the 50 years of Nobel Prizes in economics since then, only one woman had won a Nobel Prize in economics. And now there are two. This year, Esther Duflo is the co-winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics for her real-world study of how economics really works in real people's lives and how that knowledge can be used to improve the economic lives of more people. In an echo of Esther Duflo last week, Bill Gates gave voice to one of her important findings that contradicts much political talk about taxation.
We can raise taxes in a lot of ways, including, making some gifts to foundations more taxed. We have a lot of room. The current thing is not either in terms of encouraging philanthropy or discouraging and forming new business. We're not close to the limit. I mean, there was a time where we had 70% taxation rates.
Joining us now is MIT economics professor Esther Duflo, this year's co-winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics. Her new book is Good Economics for Hard Times, co-authored with her husband, Abhijit Banerjee, who is also the co-winner of this year's Nobel Prize in Economics. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It must have been so exciting for you and your husband, first husband-wife team in history to get the Nobel Prize in Economics. Getting that phone call early morning, is it, when you suddenly discover that you're the Nobel Prize winners?
Yes, it was a pretty incredible way to be woken up at 5 a.m.
Yes. And you have no hint it's coming, right? I mean, people don't realize how the Nobel works.
No hint whatsoever.
There's no nominees. You're not clear at all. So let's go to what Bill Gates just said, because it's one of the central elements of your book. And the Republican argument is, of course, you must not tax anyone more than we're taxing them. And if you tax these rich executives more, they'll just work less. It'll be a disincentive to work if we tax them at the highest level. There's Bill Gates. There's no one who's worked harder than him who's saying, oh, no, there's much more room to tax us at the highest end.
There certainly is. And if we taxed the rich more, they would work just as hard. Think about football players. In many cases, there are caps on their salaries, and that doesn't stop them from trying to win.
Yeah, the salary, you compare, and that's what's so fascinating about this. This is not just your opinion from observing the world. You've actually looked at salary caps on professional athletic teams in the United States versus Europe, where there are no salary caps. And you don't see any effort difference in the salary capped players versus the players that don't have any salary caps at all.
No, of course not, because winning is everything. And it's the same thing among CEOs. All they want is to be richer than their friends CEOs. The level doesn't really matter. What matters is the rank.
And this incentive issue is what you're finding throughout your research, that incentives in classical economic theory in the real world don't work the way we might think they do. For example, the argument about welfare, disincentivizing people. They won't try to work if you give them welfare. What did you find about that?
Similarly, the poor also don't stop working if there are no incentives for them to work. That's also an illusion. When, for example, welfare becomes more generous, people don't stop working. It's now been demonstrated in countries after countries, poor countries, rich countries, middle-income countries. The poor are not discouraged from working. In fact, we've known that since the late 60s and 70s in the US, where there were the so-called negative income tax experiment that actually gave money to the poor people and taxed it away at a rate of 50%. And it had no discouraging effect on their work. So it's actually a little secret that we have sort of kept hidden.
There's also, and what's so important about this work is you go into the field, you do real experiments to find out really how things work, and you've looked at immigration, and you tell us in this book a very different story about what immigration in the United States is doing economically.
Yeah, there is two big misconceptions about immigration. The first one is that the floodgates are just waiting to be open. And if immigration was more liberal, everybody would want to come to this country because they live in poorer country than we do. And the second misconception is if that happened, then the native workers, the poor workers in the US would be poorer. But in fact, there is a huge literature that shows that neither of these are true. First of all, the migration flows are quite low, even when there are no barriers to migration. For example, within Europe, when there was a big crisis in Greece, people mostly stayed in Greece. So it's not that people are like waiting for an opportunity to jump and come. People only come when they are desperate, or if they are super enterprising and really want to make a better life for themselves, in which case we should want to have them here because they'll contribute to the economy, be entrepreneurs, etc. The second misconception is that if a lot of low-skilled workers come, they will take away jobs or wages from the people here in these countries, and that also happens to be not true. People have looked at episodes from like the influx of Cuban refugees in Miami, or when we kicked out many migrant workers from California in the 60s. And there are dozens of episodes like that that shows that migrants do not take away wages from native workers. And this is something people do not know.
You also mentioned in here something, a new fact that I wasn't aware of, is that our internal migration rates have dropped dramatically. America used to be a place where we had a very high rate of people moving from place to place within the country, generally to where the jobs are. And now when jobs get wiped out in a particular location, people are not moving the way they used to, which, by the way, is what classical economic theory always said they would do. They'll just move to find a job. What if they don't? And that's what you're finding.
Yes, that's actually a very important presumption, both of economists and perhaps more importantly of politicians, that people would move. If I lose my job making furniture in North Carolina, I can move to New York to sell furniture. But in fact, that's not true. The rate of mobility are very low. They are about half what they were in 1948.
We're going to have to leave it there. Esther Duflo, congratulations on the Nobel. It's a real honor to have you here. I really appreciate it. This is a very important book, Good Economics for Hard Times. This book belongs at the center of the presidential campaign. That is tonight's Last Word. The 11th Hour with Brian Williams starts now.